Hello children, welcome back to the class. Have you ever thought why fishes die when they come out of water? And even you could have seen cockroaches, they die when it is turned upside down. What is the process behind this, children? Any guess? You want to know the answer? Let's get into the topic. So today we are going to talk about, very good, the process of respiration. Before entering into respiration, you need to know what is breathing. Do you think both the terms are same? No. So breathing is different. So what do you mean by breathing? We say like take a deep breath in. What does it take a deep breath in? Very good. So we inhale certain gases and we exhale certain gases, which means we take in certain air and we leave out certain air. So what is the air that we take in? Very good. So we take in oxygen and we leave out carbon dioxide. So, the taking in air, you call it as inhale, and the process you call it as inhalation. Similarly, we leave out carbon dioxide. You call this as exhale, and the process as exhalation. Okay. So this breathing. So breathing means exchange of gases. You need to understand breathing means exchange of gases. So this exchange of gases in human requires three important parts. One is ribs, the other is coastal muscles, and the third one is diaphragm. So I will tell you what are these. Okay, so breathing is just the exchange of gases. Then what is respiration? Very good. So respiration involves breathing to yield energy. So it involves breathing to yield energy. So this respiration can occur, which means the energy yield can occur. Sometimes some organisms utilize oxygen for its energy conversion, and some organisms they do not require oxygen. So based on that, you can classify respiration into two types based on the energy yield. One is aerobic respiration, the other is anaerobic respiration. So aerobic respiration is there are certain organisms which will utilize oxygen. What about anaerobic? There are certain organisms which does not require oxygen. So the breakdown of energy due to exchange of gases takes place in the presence of oxygen. You call it as aerobic, which is commonly found in human animals. And in the absence of oxygen, you call it as anaerobic respiration, which is seen in microbes. So let us see how this energy breakdown takes place. We all know that food carries the basic food components like carbohydrates, protein, fat, vitamins, minerals. So which is the maximum energy? Which gives the maximum energy? Carbohydrate. So what is the end product of carbohydrate out of digestion? Glucose. So the glucose will undergo certain process to yield energy with the help of oxygen or in the absence of oxygen. So let us see how this process takes place. Just before entering into the pathway, you need to know how food is stored in human. We know that plants store food in the form of starch. Very good. How about animals? We store food in the form of glycogen. So we store food in the form of glycogen. So this glycogen means 1000 molecules of glucose. So whenever we are in need of energy, the glycogen will undergo certain process in order to yield glucose. So this glucose will yield certain processes like glycolysis, Krebs cycle in order to further convert into energy. So first we are going to see how this conversion takes place. Okay. So this glucose which is a 6 carbon molecule, turns into pyruvate, which is a 3 carbon molecule. Okay, I told you the respiration takes place in the presence of oxygen or in the absence of oxygen. So first condition is pyruvate in the presence of oxygen. What happens? It turns into carbon dioxide plus water and plus energy. So this is commonly found in humans, animals. This is commonly seen in human and animal. So where do you think the process takes place, children? In which cell component it takes place? Very good. So this takes place in the mitochondria. It takes place in the mitochondria. The second is in the absence of oxygen. So what happens in the absence of oxygen? I will give you an example. Batter. The idli dosa batter, it turns into, you can find soreness developing or raising up of batter. It is all because of absence of oxygen. So what is the scenario behind that? Even milk turning into curd, even grapes turning into wine. So it is all because of the process called fermentation. So because of fermentation, the pyruvate will turn into ethanol and carbon dioxide plus energy. So this ethanol is a 2 carbon molecule. So animals and humans, we require oxygen for respiration, whereas lower forms like microbes, yeast, they undergo anaerobic respiration. You call that process as fermentation. Okay. And the third condition is lack of oxygen. So what is this lack of oxygen? Just imagine when we go to hill station, we climb mountains. So when we climb mountains, what will happen? The first thing, we feel tired. Then we starve for air, right? So what is it, starving for air? Our body will not require enough supply of oxygen. So in that condition, even in that condition, we still breathe. Respiration takes place in our body. So what will happen? The pyruvate will turn into a compound called lactic acid. So the pyruvate will turn into a compound called lactic acid, which is a 3 carbon molecule. So this lactic acid is responsible for the pain and the muscle cramps that we get. So even after heavy work or even after a heavy play, we find pain in our body and even we find muscle cramps in our body. It is all because of lactic acid. Okay. So this can be rectified. Do you know how? Yes, by the supply of water. So suppose if you take bath, you can find some kind of freshness. So I will tell you how that process takes place in the upcoming classes. Okay. So the glucose turns into pyruvate and this process takes place in which component? Cytoplasm. So this takes place in cytoplasm and in the presence of oxygen it yields carbon dioxide, water and energy. And in the absence of oxygen, it is turned into ethanol, carbon dioxide and energy. This takes place in yeast and the conversion you call it as fermentation. And one more condition is lack of oxygen that takes place in muscle cells in our body. So it takes place in where? The muscle cells. So this lactic acid production is responsible for pain and muscle cramps in our body. Okay? Any doubts? Okay. So as a result of this process, we yield energy in the form of ATP. So we yield energy in the form of ATP. So we all know that ATP is called the energy currency of the cell. Energy currency of the cell. So this conversion takes place in the mitochondria. So what does it ATP stands for? It stands for adenosine triphosphate. Adenosine triphosphate. So again, this energy transfer requires a process called the electron transport chain to yield an amount of ATP. So in the presence of oxygen, if respiration is taking place, we call this type of respiration as aerobic respiration. So we call this type of respiration as aerobic respiration, and in the absence of air, we call this as anaerobic respiration. So always the respiration pattern is different. Say for example, aerobic respiration, the energy yield will be 38 ATPs, whereas absence of oxygen, it yields 2 ATPs. So ATPs are the energy currency of the cell, which is responsible for many functions like contraction of muscles, conduction of nerve impulse, even protein synthesis, and all the vital functions in our body. Any doubts, children?